The Bolsheviks, from 1917 to 1923, came later to be known as the Communist Party of the Soviet Union. They had begun the revolution in Russia, where the communists reigned. Since the perfect timing of the rise of the party, their influence was widely accepted by the common people. This was because of the failure of the economy and the need for change. The Bolshevik Central Committee said an armed uprising is inevitable and the time for it is fully ripe. Once in power, the leaders changed the nation. The potential power and influence will be determined by the outcome of World War II. This eventually led them to become a world superpower. This is how the revolution began.
Crime, privileges, and class division plagued Russia, but were swiftly eliminated overnight. A new era of socialism promised peace, prosperity, and equality for all. As a result of the Great World War in Europe, there was a necessity for change in Russia. World War I had caused a great famine in Russia. After the discovery of the intentional hoarding of bread, workers of St. Petersburg began protesting, eventually leading to the demand of the end of the Russian monarchy. These protests soon turned violent, and soldiers were soon called to remove these rebels. 80 men, women, and children were shot by police and soldiers. Cossacks turned on the Tsar and sided with the people because of the kindness of a little girl. All of this transpired while the Tsar was focused on the war program against Germany. The Tsar responded with more army units with orders to kill. The slogan of these rebels was freedom or death. Soldiers were initially hesitant to pull the trigger, but their superiors threatened their lives when they did not. They opened fire, but their confidence in what they were doing was shaken. The Tsar failed to end the protests. The soldiers who were forced to fire were angry because they had killed 50 civilians. One soldier, Sergei Kapishnikov, said, "Our fathers, mothers, sisters, and brothers are begging for bread. Are we going to kill them too?" The army now sided with civilians and committed mutiny against the crown. These mutineers gathered support from other soldiers, giving the rebels strength and numbers. The Tsar's personal train was stopped by a rebel blockade and turned trip from the fighting taking place in Germany, forcing him to stay idle. For the first time, the Tsar realized that the Romanov dynasty might be coming to an end. After several failed attempts at subduing the rebels in retaliation with gunfire, Tsar Nicholas II abdicated. He attempted to give the crown to his brother, Grand Duke Michael, but he declined and instead said that he wouldn't take the throne until there was a national vote held to determine if the people still wanted the monarchy. This abdication ended the Romanov family 3-century-long dynasty.
January 28, 1918. The Council of People's Commissions created the Red Army and was founded by Leon Trotsky. Its purpose was to the defense of the achievements of the October Revolution, the Soviet power, and socialism. All citizens of the Russian Republic over 18 were eligible to join. The council became the supreme head over the Red Army. The supreme commander-in-chief was Nikolai Krylenko. At the start of the war, it comprised of 298 infantry regiments. By the end of the revolution, it comprised of 83% ex-Tsarist soldiers. The Bolshevik Red Army made alliances with other left pro-revolutionary groups to fight against the White Army. The Allied forces intervened and notably fought against the Red Army. The Allies saw this as a threat and that its ideas would spread west. Winston Churchill declared that the Bolshevism must be strangled in its cradle. The Bolsheviks overthrew the provisional government in a raid that lasted hours. Now, Lenin could honor his honor of peace. During the Great War, The Germans advanced through the Eastern Front with no resistance that lasted 11 days. The Soviets signed the Treaty of Brest-Litovsk. They saw it as the only means to stop the war. By 1920, much of the fighting ended, but there were still certain areas that continued resistance until 1923.
On February 1st, 1924, Great Britain officially recognized the USSR as a country, and the USSR ratified the Soviet Constitution, legitimizing the country. Following the death of Soviet hero Vladimir Lenin, Joseph Stalin rose to power. Although Stalin had been a leader of the revolution, his beliefs clashed with that of Soviet military leader Leon Trotsky, causing Stalin to exile Trotsky. Following Stalin's gradual rise to absolute power in the Soviet Union, he began implementing powerful economic plans through the Bolshevik initial decrees, 5-year plans, and command economy. One of the biggest accomplishments from these decrees was Go Railroad, which provided electricity to all of the USSR, which was accomplished through the building of 10 massive hydroelectric power plants, as well as many other electrically powered enterprises. 5-year plans were centralized economic plans in which a state planning committee would vote on how plans to handle economic development over the next 5 years would be handled. These plans caused a massive increase in the industrial development of the Soviet Union because Stalin believed the most important process to creating a utopia was through the success of these plans. These plans started small so that the goals were always attainable, but after every 5 years, when a new plan was set, the goals would be higher. As a result of Stalin's economic ideology, the USSR turned into a global industrial power, putting itself on the path to becoming a world power. One of the tragedies of the Soviet Union, however, was its use of penal labor camps in the remote location of Siberia. These camps were for people who committed crimes against the nation and Stalin. Millions of citizens were deported, many never heard from it again. As a result of the massive deportation of people, the Soviet food production drastically declined. This caused the Soviet famine of 1932 and 33. This famine was immense and killed millions. Another stain on the Soviet Union legacy was the Great Purge. In the Great Purge, Stalin had hundreds of thousands of people executed, including Red Army leaders, charging them with attempts to overthrow the Soviet government. In 1939, the Soviet Union and Germany agreed to the Soviet-Germany Non-Aggressive Pact, giving the Soviet Union land formerly owned by the Russian Empire, such as Eastern Poland, Finland, the Baltics, Bessarabia, and northern Bukovina. In addition, both Germany and the Soviet Union agreed not to attack each other.
During World War II, the Soviet Union sided with the Allied forces when the Nazi Germany had invaded Russia. They did it on an agreement. The agreement was that the Allied forces would get the Nazis out of Russia, and in turns, Russia would help out the Allied forces with the rest of World War II. The Allies had completed their part of the deal, but the Soviet Union had never completed theirs. After the surrender of the Nazi Germany, there was a time period called the Cold War. The Cold War was a continuing state of political and military tension between the powers of the Western world, led by the United States, and the Communists, led by the Soviet Union. This began after the success of their temporary wartime alliance against Nazi Germany, leaving the Soviet Union and the United States as the only two superpowers in the world with profound economic and political differences. The Cold War is named as it is because it never featured any direct military action, since both sides possessed nuclear weapons, and because their use would have probably guaranteed their own destruction. The conflict was instead expressed through military coalition, strategic conventional force deployments, extensive aid to states, espionage, propaganda, conventional and nuclear arms races, appeals to the neutral nations, rivalry at sporting events such as the Olympics, and technological competitions such as the space race. The space race was a race that involved pioneering efforts to launch artificial satellites, orbital human space flights around Earth, and piloted voyages to the moon.
It effectively began with the Soviet launch of Sputnik 1, an artificial satellite, on October 4th, 1957, and concluded with the cooperative Apollo-Soyuz test project human spaceflight missions in July 1975. The test project came to symbolize a detente, which is a partial easing of strained relations between the USSR and the United States. Some of the famous launches and probes include Sputnik 1, Explorer 1, Vostok 1, Mariner 2, Ranger 7, Luna 9, Apollo 8, and the famous Apollo 11. After this, in Germany itself, after World War II, Germany was distraught. It was so distraught that a barrier was built, constructed by the German Democratic Republic, or East Germany, started on August 13 of 1961, that completely cut off West Berlin from surrounding East Germany and from East Berlin. The barrier included guard towers placed along large concrete walls. West Germany claimed that the wall was an erect to protest its population from fascist elements conspiring to prevent the will of the people and building a social state in East Germany. In practice, the wall served to prevent the massive immigration and defection which marked Germany and the communist Eastern Bloc during the post-World War II period. In 1889, a radical series of political changes occurred in the Eastern Bloc, associated with the liberation of Eastern Bloc's authoritarian systems and the erosion of political power in the pro-Soviet governments in nearby Poland and Hungary. After several weeks of civil unrest, the East German government announced on November 9, 1889, that all GDR citizens could visit West Germany and West Berlin. Citizens of both East and West Germany gathered on this day to bring down the wall, and it is known as a huge celebration in our world's history.
From 1917 to 1991, the Bolshevik Revolution, the revolution that changed the world and the Russian people for 74 years. From its involvement in World War II, the Cold War, and the fall of the Berlin Wall, these ideals, brought by such leaders, influenced many nations, ranging from good to bad. This was the Bolshevik Revolution.
All I do is win, 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 no matter what. Got money on my mind, I can never get enough. And every time I step up in the building, everybody hands go up. And they stay there, and they